and welcome to Extraordinary People in an Ordinary World. I'm your host, Beth, and I'm an ordinary person amazed by the extraordinary people surrounding us. This podcast is about people who live among us who are doing extraordinary things. You can expect to meet people from all walks of life doing things that may inspire you, make you want to change, or just simply sit back and delight in their stories. I have met the most extraordinary people in my ordinary world, and I am so grateful to have the opportunity to share their stories. Now listen in and enjoy. Your inspiration may be right here in this episode. Today's interview is with Father Hank Hilton. I first learned of Father Hank from my sister-in-law, Susan. Father Hank was a priest at her parish in Metuchen. He was then transferred to another parish, and he was now where my sister attended Mass at St. Joseph's in Hillsborough. Both my sister and my sister-in-law spoke so highly of Father Hank and how much they appreciated him in their parish. When COVID stopped people from attending Mass in person, I decided I was going to tune in to St. Joseph's and hear Father Hank for myself. The inability to attend Mass made the pandemic even more devastating. As a Catholic, I was able to receive the true presence of Jesus in the body and blood offered at the Mass, but I found peace when I was able to tune in to Father Hank each week. Father Hank gave a sense of everything is going to be all right when everything felt like it would fall apart. He allowed you to feel part of a community you didn't even know, and he gave those in this community hope. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Father Hank and welcome him to the show. Welcome, Father Hank.
Thank you very much, Beth. It's very good to be with you, and thank you for all those kind things you've said.
Well, it's true. It's very, very true. So if we can begin by you telling the audience about yourself, where you grew up, a little bit about your family dynamics, and what made you decide to become a priest.
Great. So I'm a New Jersey boy, as they say from the. I'm a New Jersey piney, from the top of my New Jersey head to the bottom of my New Jersey hiney. Right? There's that great.
That's a good one.
But I'm not quite a piney. I'm just a clam digger from Monmouth County. Grew up down there, a very nice place to grow up at the Jersey Shore. So I am the sixth out of 8 kids. And as I'll tell anybody who'll listen, I'm definitely the nicest of the 6 kids. And
I bet.
Yeah. So 5 boys, 3 girls. I'm down in the bottom half of that group. And life for us was, the more I realized, the more I think about it, we were so lucky. It was really a water-based family. we spent as much time on the water as we did on land for the most part, and anything beyond the water. So I came from a group of sailors and duck hunters, and I was on the rowing team, and another brother is a champion sailor. We're all minor league sailors. My little brother just won a big world championship last year. My little brother at age 60.
Oh, wow.
Brother Peter was a massive water skier. So it's just, and I won't give you too much information, but when I think about how I ran into this latest round of being treated for different kinds of skin cancer, I came by it honestly. There's no mystery about where that came from. I was a lifeguard at the shore. I sailed as much as I could. And, back in the day, we had SPF 2 or SPF 3 for copper tone or sea and ski or something. So anyhow.
Or baby oil, right?
Or baby oil. Yeah, I saved my baby oil. That was more like the girls in my class did that. And the boys we would be on the lifeguard stand and until our noses would bleed. And then we'd cover them with, what was that white stuff? Zinc oxide.
Oh, zinc oxide.
Zinc oxide, yeah. So, I grew up down at the Jersey Shore. Lots and lots of water in my past. And went to college at Fordham. I went to community college for a year. Went to college at Fordham. And it was there that I met the Jesuits. And you know how I got to be a priest? I always was like a little bit of a churchy guy. When I was a lifeguard, the beach where I was a lifeguard, the club didn't open until 9 o'clock on Sunday mornings. It was a big Catholic club. And the owner had, for years and years, the club opened at 8 o'clock every day except for Sunday, which was 9 o'clock, so that you could get to 8 o'clock Mass and then get over the bridge and into the lifeguard stand by 9 o'clock, right? It was giving you time to go to church. I actually did that, and I just thought that was why not? Like, yeah, I would use the time to go to church. And I went to public high school and we'd get holy days late admission for the Catholic kids. And I actually went to church. I didn't think anything of it. I thought it was just normal. And when I went to college, I was much into church. So I just really liked going to church. I liked a lot of things, and going to church was one of them. It all made a whole lot of sense. And then I went to college at Fordham, and then I went off to, I got lucky and I got a scholarship to do a master's in economics at Fordham, which I did. And then after that, I got lucky again, and I got a job offer from Texaco, and I was an energy economist at Texaco for 2+ years before I went into the Jesuits. Yeah. So that's where I came across my big fascination with the energy industry. I stumbled into that job. Just couldn't get enough of it, and realized that it was a very exciting time in the oil industry. It was 1980. The Iranian Revolution was going on, the Iraq War. I was the new guy at Texaco after a year, so the economics people divvied up the responsibilities of knowing each country, so that when the big oil executives would go overseas, they would call and want a country restudy. So they decided to redo it like the State Department does it, where like you're the Saudi Arabia desk and you're the Nigeria desk and whatnot. I was 22 years old, and I got to be the Iraq desk at Texaco. And about 15 minutes after they assigned the job to me, Iraq invaded Iran.
Oh, my goodness.
And they didn't take the job away from me and give it to someone more seasoned. They said, no, that's your job, so do it. It was an incredibly exciting time. It was, the tragedies, the disasters, the horrors, just the amazing sense of history unfolding, and just being paid to watch it as up close and personal as possible, right? I loved that job. But I also knew that this thing about being a priest was a real thing, too. So I went kicking and screaming interiorly. I would have been very happy to stay. And the way I tell it, though, is pretty much I got us through I got the world through the first oil crisis, then the second oil crisis, and I figured it was time to go join up and be a priest and face the next big challenge. Right? So my departure from there coincided with the end of the second oil crisis, and I could have stayed there. It was so intriguing. So anyhow, then I joined the Jesuits. Was 2 years in Syracuse, 2 years in Chicago, 3 years in Buffalo, 4 years in Cambridge, ordination, 3 years in Madison, 15 years in Baltimore, and now I've been here for 10 years, which is just so hard to imagine.
So that's something I was going to ask you, because not everybody that listens will know that priests get relocated quite frequently.
Yeah.
So how difficult is that to transition from?
So it's you get used to it. So there's two different ways of doing it. One of the things that's probably worth mentioning here is that from 1981 until what year was it? 2017. So 36 years, I was in the Jesuits. Okay. And then I switched over. I did a thing known as incardinating, which is a process by which a priest goes from being a member of a religious order to being a member of a diocese, right? Okay. So in the Jesuits, as it is with any order, it's a worldwide order. When you get transferred, you can get transferred any place, right? Well, usually within your province and so forth, but the whole world is out there. I have my classmates. One of them is in the South Pacific, teaching at a high school there in Truck. One of them is a professor of biblical theology in Rome. One of them is the president of Georgetown Prep outside of Washington, D.C. And the fourth one is an Army chaplain, recently returned from Jordan, and now he's in Fort Dick. So you could be any place, right?
Wow.
Right. But with the diocese, it's different. And so when you join up, you're pretty much going to be in these 4 counties of the Metuchen Diocese. So it's Middlesex, Somerset, Hunterdon, and Warren counties. And once in a while, guys go out of the diocese to serve. They have guys in Rome. They have a couple of chaplains and so forth. But the basic, gestalt of it is you're going to be in this area, whereas with the religious orders, you could be any place. So being moved around in the Jesuits, it was a question of New York, Chicago, Buffalo, Boston, Wisconsin, Baltimore, all over the place. I basically ran back and forth across I-90. And when I was in formation, I went from everything I did was on Interstate 90 back and forth. And then I switched over to I-95, and I went from New York down to Baltimore. So I headed south. So getting moved around is when you do it as a Jesuit and you relocate from the East Coast to the Midwest. That's a big deal. That's different friends, different everything. When you move from one side of Middlesex County to the far side of Somerset County, it's not that big a deal, really. I mean, it's different people, different daily routines, but the people who are nearest and dearest, you're not, ages away from them. You don't have to,
Right.
rely on the Pony Express to get your connections across. So, um, but and every time I'm a real homebody, so wherever I am, I like to stay there. And then when it's time to leave, I don't want to leave. That's true of anything. So, when it came to going to Buffalo, I was in Chicago. I loved Chicago. I thought that was the greatest city on earth. Then I
Really?
moved to Buffalo. I thought, oh my gosh, I don't want to go to Buffalo. Father Provincial, don't make me go to Buffalo. Why do I have to do that? What did I do wrong? Well, I was there about 2 days, and it went from desperation to jubilation.
Oh,
They
wow.
had the best rowing program. I was a rower when I was in college, and I got to
Okay.
Buffalo, and I heard about the West Side Rowing Club, and I joined the West Side Rowing Club, and I hooked up with the greatest guys. We had the most wonderful four, and then we had a terrific eight. Um, it was bliss. And then once you get one thing in order, all the rest of it falls in. And I didn't want to leave there, and I had to go to Cambridge. Then I had to go to Wisconsin. And I left kicking and screaming from Wisconsin. So the answer is, what's it like to move around? Moving there is the easy part. Leaving's the hard part. I'd never like to leave wherever I am. I just want to stay there for the rest of my life. But
Well, I'll tell
no,
you, I know my sister-in-law, Susan, when you left Metuchen, she was quite sad, but my sister, Patty, who lives in Hillsborough, was quite excited.
that's very, very kind of them. I got to tell you that. So thank you for that. Yeah, and it's always harder for the people left behind. I've learned that the hard way too, right? When
Very
people are
true.
moving around, it's always harder for the ones left behind. So, in all of that, the priest thing really came through. It was always part of who I was, and with my friends, I was a little bit of an outlier at a time when it was Woodstock and hippies and who wants to go to church. Well, I did.
Mhm.
And then it was a drive across the country. My parents sent me out to drive a sister home who was moving back from California. And I loaded up her stuff in a truck and we drove east. I was a sophomore, junior in college. And I was swept away by going to mass in pretty much every place we stopped on the way across. And the overwhelming sensation, because I stopped in a place at a Hopi Indian village in the town of Sickmoby, Arizona, went to search for the Cottonwood Kachina dolls. And all they had in this village was like Barbie dolls dressed up. It was like, wait, where's the cottonwood?
Mhm.
Where's the corn husk? Where's the other stuff? And all I could think about was, what would it be like if in our church it came to the point where there was nobody there to offer mass?
Mhm.
And I thought it could go the way of the Kachina dolls, right? And that
Right.
never left me. It's like, okay, if not you, if like Ronald Reagan said it later on, if not you, who? If not now, when? Right?
Right.
And the question of being the one who's there to offer the Eucharist to people, it seemed more important than the oil crisis. You know what I mean? In the long run, as much as I loved, scaring everything away, wanted to
Mhm.
broker peace between Iraq and Iran. Um,
Well, we're happy you came to the priesthood for
yeah,
sure.
yeah. It was a tough call. But again, I could have stayed there for a long time wherever I am.
Mhm.
I could have stayed over in your place for a long time. That's a great town you got going over there, right? Where your sister
Hillsborough?
is.
Oh,
So,
yeah, yeah. Oh,
Metuchen,
Metuchen, yeah.
train to New York, beautiful little
Uh,
downtown, lots of great people.
easy to get around.
Yeah, that was another
Yeah.
great town. Yeah,
Well, I mean, that's the cathedral also, right?
yeah.
There in
And
Metuchen.
and and the truth of it is, I'm kind of for the low profile stuff. So I could not be happier being out here where I am. Like I'm really the luckiest guy in so many ways. Like
Oh.
being sent here, I never heard of this town. What did I know from Hillsborough? I grew up in the
Mhm.
swamp. I didn't grow up in the Somerset County.
Right.
And I
Right.
lucked out. I totally lucked out by coming here.
So I said that I listened and learned more about you during COVID and everything that happened with COVID. You seemed to really connect with all the parishioners. Anybody who was online, you felt like you were part of your parish. And one of the things you talked about were jumbles. And that really resonated with me. That made me feel like everything's going to be okay.
Yeah,
And can you talk about the jumbles and what they
yeah,
were?
sure. I will reiterate, the pandemic was one of the best things that ever happened to me as a priest. It
Wow.
was, for a priest with a certain disposition, a certain personality or ministerial style. What a rare opportunity to really live everything you wanted to be about.
Mm.
So who had prepared for the jumble? Who had prepared rather for the pandemic? The answer is nobody. Who knew how to do a pandemic? None of us knew how to do a pandemic, right?
No.
And none of us knew how to do church in a pandemic. And we met, I will tell you, I mean, looking back, you think the Holy Spirit must have been exhausted after all the activity in the first couple of weeks of the pandemic. I'll never forget it. It was the Ides of March was the 15th, was a Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when we sent the word out that Mass is going to stop. None of us could believe it. And then 17th was the last Mass, St. Patrick's Day. And then 19th, a day later, 2 days later, exactly one day into the official pandemic, we got the live stream up and running.
That quick.
Can I tell you about the hand of God? We have a superb buildings and grounds committee out here, right?
Yeah.
And I've been dragging my feet about upgrading the Wi-Fi for the whole place, maybe for 2 years. And I said, okay, because there's other things I think we should use, ways to spend the money that we put away. And they convinced me, and so they were right. I was just not seeing it clearly. I didn't trust them. I mean, I trusted them, but I didn't agree with them, right? Sometimes you have to do this. You don't agree, but you trust them, so you're going to go with them.
There's a little statement my aunt always says, that was God acting anonymously.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way to put it. And that's exactly what it was. So about a month before the pandemic really heated up in March of 2020, we completed all the Wi-Fi installation for the church.
Wow.
So 2 days into it, I said to our youth minister, who's a tech wizard, well, what are we going to do about this? Well, actually, before the whole thing got started, I asked him, how do you think we're going to do it? We had a good staff meeting. And then that Monday, which was the second to last day of church, I just said, okay, staff, what are we going to do? How are we going to keep people connected? I think that's going to be the big problem. None of us knew what it was going to be like, right? And I said, I think we need to think of ourselves as marketers. And we need to sort of be marketing serenity. And with any good marketing campaign, you need a logo, right? You need a symbol that's going to look at that thing and think, right, that reminds me, like the cross, but that wasn't the point. So we just had a brainstorming idea, and I thought about, what about the lights? What can we do with lights, the light in the darkness, because the pandemic was so dark. And we just, I don't know who's thought of it, but just the word jumble finally fell into this conversation. And we thought there's going to be no organization of lights. There's going to be no logo. It's just going to be a big jumble, but it's going to be a jumble of light, right? Mm-hmm. It's going to be a jumble of the light that reminds us of, we can't always make sense of it, but God can help us make sense of it. And even though it's disordered appearing and chaotic, there's light to be found in all of the situations. So let's not pretend it's not a jumble. It's a jumble, but it's a jumble of light. And there was a sense all through it. And remember how weird it was in the early days before the vaccines? We all shut down in, March. And then the vaccines didn't really come around until January, as I recall, right?
I think so, yeah. I think it was about January.
Yeah, it was the following January. It was crazy.
Nobody thought you'd be locked in for that long.
Oof. No, we thought it'd be a couple of weeks.
Right.
Right? And I thought, oh my gosh, it's great. It's going to be a week's vacation. I'm going to paint the office and clean out all those files, get all that stuff out of here. Guess what? The office still didn't get painted 5 years later. But I can never thank God enough for the way that we experienced that. That just to acknowledge it, we are in a jumble. Let's not use cliches. Let's not use bromides and a lot of cheap slogans. We're in a jumble rather, and it's confusing and it's bewildering, and you can't figure out which way you're going. But here's what we know: God will be with us, and we can be with one another in whatever way it's possible, right?
That message got me through, because I will say that the pandemic was very hard for me, really? Mentally.
Yeah.
But that message every week from you got me through.
Yeah, it was. And thank you for saying that. One of the things too was the importance in dealing with it of names.
Mm-hmm.
Really, really important. So you might recall that in the early days of the pandemic, we had in early April, it was Good Friday that year. We had 3 people die on the same day.
Wow.
One was a young mom, one was an older dad, and one was sort of a sister of a parishioner who used to visit here. She was probably in her 50s. Yeah, we've really felt it. Like we
But
knew.
you made those names important to everyone, because me not even being a parishioner felt like I knew those people when you talked about them.
Let me tell you, and it was so very important to know that, I'd probably do the whole dissertation if I had to write another PhD about the importance of names. That when people would email and say, "Will you pray for my sister? I think she's going to die from COVID." Yeah, what's her name? And then they could live stream, they could hear that person's name. Lord, hear our prayer. Right?
Right.
And knowing that the number of people out there in the live stream land, hundreds of them, thousands of them in the early days, to know that people I can't see, people in Missouri, people in Texas, people in California, people in India are joining and they're praying for my sister by name. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And when we'd say that we pray for somebody, we really took that seriously. It wasn't, we'll put them on the list. No, we will pray for them by name. Mm-hmm. And it was a whole big to-doodle that went on after. I wish we had movies of that. I think we do have movies of that. I think that was so important, and that did create a sense of community. And we did cheer. Because remember, we ended up having a special section when people would come off the list when they'd recover. So we'd pray for people who died, we'd pray for people who were sick with it, and then we prayed for people who'd recovered from it. And we pray in gratitude for like a week for each one of those people. We want to thank God for the recovery of the following people, right? And that was really important too. We learned so much about that. But I'm getting sort of spaced out. It was the jumble for everybody. None of us had done it before. But I felt kind of like, and this is me getting too, wistful or far away, or, it's like when you're steering a boat and something really bad happens and you're the skipper on the boat, you got to project confidence, like you're going to figure this thing out, right? And I didn't really know that about me, but I'll tell you what, I was sailing this summer, my little sloop, and there's 2 call them metal ropes, shrouds that come down that hold the mast in place. And I made a port tack. Doesn't make any difference. This one shroud came out of the deck, and so there was only one shroud holding the mast up, which is a really bad situation, right? Mm. It means you can only go in one direction. You can only go in the direction where the wind is pushing it, so that the pressure is on the shroud that's there. And I said to the 2 people on board, I said, "No, listen, something bad just happened, but here's what we're going to do. You're going to hold this thing. You're going to take this. You're going to do that. It's going to be fine. We're going to make this thing happen." And we made it happen. And when I came out of that, I thought, that was like the pandemic, right? I never had a shroud break on a boat before, right? But you just figure, okay, here's what we're going to do. Here's what we have to work with. Here's the people. They're good people. They're smart people. They're brave people. And that little moment on the boat this summer was like it was a moment of, oh, now I understand the pandemic. Because I think we did, as a parish, project a certain level of confidence, right?
100%, 100%.
We're going to be okay with this thing. We can. There's stuff to break your heart, and there's also stuff to laugh about, right? Mm-hmm. And the stuff of, really, that lady touched my grapes, then that lady breathed on the asparagus. Now I got to throw it all away. Like, you think, no, you're getting a little carried away there. You know what I mean? Remember how cautious we were? Oh my gosh!
Oh yeah,
everything was the end of the world. Mm-hmm. But you just knew that God was not going to. It's like that thing. You didn't lead us this far to abandon us.
Well, that was the message I got. Like, I never I mean, every time I listened on a Sunday, and at the time we were caring for my mom who had Alzheimer's, so we would share time at her house and we would listen in with my mom. And she felt, because of the pandemic, she didn't understand. She thought people didn't like her anymore. So it was real hard to explain to her. But every time we tuned in, I felt like, oh, relief. I felt relief every time I tuned in.
That's And you know what? I got to share that news. I do share that news. We get lots and lots of beautiful messages from people out there in live stream land. And I always want to share it with the tech ministry, the people who actually get there and drive the bus and make the thing go on the screen and all that.
Mm-hmm. In Hillsborough.
I can share with you, we have some of the most beautiful letters. There's this 97-year-old lady in Missouri who mailed a letter. It said, Father Hank, Gary, Indiana. So the people at this church, St. Joseph's Church, Gary, Indiana. How she came up with Gary, Indiana, I don't know. But the people in Gary, Indiana got this note and they realized that it was really an important thing. And they somehow figured out who the Father Hank was.
For real?
And they tracked it down and they forwarded this lady's letter to us.
Wow.
Her name was Merle and she's from Missouri. I haven't written to her in a long time. But she wrote to say that she had stumbled onto it because she wanted to go. Her church was named St. Joe's, or her home church or something, and she stumbled onto us. She stayed with us forever. She stayed with us for a very long time, and she used to write to us, and she would send us $5 and say, "Please use this to keep the ministry going because it's so important to us."
Wow.
And I was always trying to impress on the tech ministry that the importance of what they're doing because there's this lady in Missouri who's sending $5 to the wrong address. This is with a beautiful, sincere heart, because what you guys are doing is enabling her to experience peace. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It was crazy. I'll tell you this much: the pandemic was exasperating in terms of I'd come back from mass some days, and there'd be 400 emails to answer. It was overwhelming.
So less time to paint the office than you thought for sure with all those emails.
Yeah. But a lot of the people, they couldn't get, and no, I'm not faulting any priests, but they couldn't get to church. There was no place for them to go. They tune into us. You become their de facto pastor. What are you going to do? Say, just not answer it? Say, tough luck. I'm sorry, your father died of COVID?
Mm-hmm.
No, you can put him on the list. I think I got post-COVID stress syndrome or something.
I believe it.
Yeah, it was a lot. But it was all good.
During the pandemic, people hung up the jumbles of lights throughout Hillsborough, and anybody that drove by somebody's house knew, oh, Father Hank, the jumbles. Are they still hanging those?
No, they're not. And There was a moment here except I have pictures here of a couple of photographs of people. There's one from Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania.
Wow.
Beautiful picture of a jumble hanging in an antique archway of an old Victorian house with the jumble at night and then the moon beyond it. It's really quite consoling. It's beautiful. There came a time when, without ever saying it, we said, we're moving out of pandemic mode. I happen to love the jumble motif. I think it is, you can see it, mine's still in my window here. But people not just think of it as Christmas lights. There's a couple of places around. Sometimes people still send the pictures of their jumbles, right?
I love the concept. I love it. And,
for
people who can't see your lights, it's just when you take your Christmas lights out of the box to put them up and they're all in a big knot, that's what it looks like.
Stick them up there. Yeah. Right. It really is the big knot of Christmas lights. So, I know some people were so desperate for the pandemic to end, and I had like Stockholm syndrome a little bit. It was a captivity experience that it was just so much good came out of it. I mean, we had to let it go. The pandemic was over and so forth. And people think I like a pandemic fixation. Some people joke about it. So we still have spaces out here in the church.
Mm-hmm.
But so we learned so much from this stuff, Beth. But it was like people, it wasn't just because of COVID. It's some people are in like, chemo therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And they can't sit right on top of strangers. It's not good for them.
Right.
So we still have 2 of the 7 sections here where there's every other pew. And we pretty much fill them. We went with it, we did the outdoor communion services. And what there's this one again, the volunteers in this place are breathtaking, and the stuff they came up with and the ideas they had. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, these people! How did I get to be so lucky to be around these brilliant people who figured this out? We took 20 parking spaces out here in the parking lot, and the parking spaces are painted with pink paint. The blue was already taken, yellow was already taken, red was already taken, green was already taken. So we did pink. And every Sunday at 11:30, you can only park in the pink spaces if you're going to stay in your car for mass. You turn the radio, you come to church, you turn the radio on, you listen to mass, and then I bring communion out to the cars, right?
Wow, that's amazing.
We still have people, and the groups that when I say that with the pandemic taught us stuff, the lessons were so profound. Whoever thought of this? Let me give you one example. What about you have a mother who has gone into that frontal temporal lobe dementia?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you know that thing where it's a really specific kind of
Yes.
Alzheimer's kind of thing. And she can't be around crowds. She's okay in the car with you, but she can't be around crowds. On a lucid day, she really, really wants to go to church, but you never know if she goes to church, is she going to have an episode? And you don't want to embarrass her, right?
Mm-hmm.
So come to church here at 11:30. Sit in the car, put the heater on, turn on the radio. You have zero worries about mom acting out.
Wow.
You can relax. She can relax. Communion comes. After you listen to the whole mass, you sing along in the car. You're sitting in the pink spaces. Communion comes to you out there. What's not to love about that? Right?
I mean, that's amazing because as a Catholic, that's what we want. We want to receive communion. So being able to participate in the mass and not just have somebody come to your home and bring you communion, there's a difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there's a place for go to bring communion to home.
Right.
But if you are somewhat able-bodied, you're on chemo, you so want to receive communion, you so want to be a part, you want to be at church. There's something that happens there. You feel like they can feel like they're part of the congregation, even though they're in the car. I can't explain it, but I know it's true.
I believe it. I believe it.
Yeah, it's an incredible blessing. We do the same thing on Wednesdays. We have communion services in the parking lot. Again, it's people who are just, to whatever reason, because of an illness or an injury or a psychological thing. That's just a communion service, but we'll get 30 cars every week, the same 40 or 50 people, and it's home for them. It's a home for them, right? Everybody needs a home. Right?
Yeah. You make that seem so, I don't know. It doesn't, I don't know of anywhere else that it happens. So
yeah. And maybe it's not meant to happen every place, but I'll tell you, for our people, that we can, everything's going to be okay. Nothing's going to come between you and the body of Christ.
I love that.
Right. And
I love that.
It really means a lot to people. But it's the same thing. Like we have, last week was 7 times a year, we have a whole fleet of people come in here. I don't know, 20 or 30 people. And they take gifts to the homebound. And that's 70 people who can't come to church, who probably get communion at home, or whatever it is. But 7 times a year, they're reminded that their parish hasn't forgotten them.
Wow.
Right? And these are people with dementia, some of them. These are people with chronic illness. These are people and the caregivers. When I was taking care of my little sister, and that my parish wasn't so hot, I learned a lot from that. But what an experience it is to think that those people over at church really give a darn about my sister, right?
Yes.
It's let no one walk alone. Let no one walk alone. So the stuff that we did in the pandemic, and we have amazing volunteers here and great staff and people who come up with just incredible ideas about how to make sure people don't feel alone. Can you see that all those flowers in the vases behind me there?
Yes.
Yeah. So those are people who've had stuff go on that makes you sad. They've had very sad things in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
And we send out the care packages, and I got my list every day of, the 17 people I need to call just in case I lose track of anybody,
So you send those flowers out to people who are having a hard time.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. That's really nice.
Yeah,
that's
to those
really
I'm going to deliver. I'll take them tomorrow because you can't ask staff to do that on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day, right? But
I have a funny feeling your staff would do it.
What's that?
I said, I have a funny feeling your staff would do it. They sound pretty extraordinary.
An extraordinary bunch of people, exceptional bunch of people, right? The ones who reach out to take care of the people who are on tough times.
Mm-hmm.
I wish I had a contest to enter them in,
Mm-hmm. But
that's another case of, I could ask them, and of course they would. I didn't want to ask them on Christmas Eve. They have real lives, you know what I mean? But it's more and more the awareness of how good people are. They just want an opportunity. They just want someone to ask them to help, Mm-hmm. Tomorrow's Tuesday, right?
Right.
We feed. Our parish food truck goes up to Manville and feeds anywhere from 60 to 100 meals on a Tuesday night, right? People come up.
Where do they feed them? Like in a
food truck is in a parking lot at a church up in Manville.
Oh, wow.
So people come, most of them come on foot, some of them drive. And just so happens that we've never missed a Tuesday. We've been doing it for 3 years. And my point with this ministry is consistency. We can't be one of those organizations that, you're there most of the time, but then a couple of Tuesdays you're not there. People can't rely on that. You can't. We've never missed rain, shine, miserable weather, 70 degrees below zero, 500 degrees with thunderstorms. We are there every Tuesday, right? And sometimes it's only 30 or 40 people who come, but they'll take food for 100 people. They take the stuff home. And tomorrow's Tuesday, and tomorrow's Christmas Eve. And guess what?
You're going to be there.
We'll be there.
That's
right. Let no one walk alone. Let no one think that everybody needs to know that someone cares about them, right?
Yes.
And we have a guy in the parish who lost his wife 2 or 3 years ago, and he was at sea. And what better way to find your bearings than to serve? This guy, twice a month, he mashes 45 pounds of potatoes.
Wow.
So we're going to have Mike's famous potatoes up there tomorrow. And we're going to have a whole ham. And
as you know, this podcast is called Extraordinary People in an Ordinary World. And I think you got a big cluster of them there at St. Joe's.
Oh, I could give you scores and scores of people who are able to connect the dots between their efforts and God's love, right?
Mm-hmm.
They don't need to think of themselves as canonized saints or archangels or something. They're just realizing that if I can mash these potatoes and get them to that person who otherwise might be just eating candy bars for dinner, if they could find a candy bar to eat, somehow that person is going to have an experience. It is open to the possibility that they live in a world created by a loving God, right?
Yes.
It's really hard for people who have no experience of loving acts, concrete loving acts in their lives. It's real hard for them to believe in the possibility of a loving God they can't see. What people can see is that, wow, somebody showed up with ham and mashed potatoes for me. That's what God wants us to do, right? Right?
Yes.
Give people less to worry about, I think.
It's a great message for sure.
Yeah. And again, it's like the jumble message. We can do this. We can do this. We can take care of each other. We can figure this out. I'm getting too philosophical here.
I think it's real important. It is the message that we need to hear. And there are some people that don't know God, and they can maybe get a glimpse of him in these actions that people are doing.
And to know that ultimately the reason that people are delivering mashed potatoes in 20-degree weather is because they have a sense that the God they love and worship and the God who sends them thinks that it's pretty important to deliver mashed potatoes, right, on Christmas Eve. But maybe all you have is a lot of recollections of better days when you had a family or a heart full of hope or something. And, who knows why things went south. But even when things go south, there's someone there who cares about you, right?
Yeah.
There's someone there who cares about you.
You and your team there at St. Joe's is making that happen for sure.
It's an amazing bunch of people here. Amazing bunch of people here. And, with the youth ministry group, too, that they're learning the importance of this stuff. They do their service projects and they pray. It's all three things. Our parish is built on those three things about our baptism: prayer, service, and building community. And when you're baptized, the deacon or the priest puts the oil on your head and says, "May you remain forever a member of Christ, who is priest, prophet, and king." And best I can understand, that means someone who is a priest is a person who prays. A prophet is someone who consoles and who serves. The king or the queen is someone who builds up the community, right? Prayer, service, community. Prayer, service, community. Prayer, service, community. I mean, pretty much everything we do is based on that.
Yeah.
Old people, young people. It gets repetitive after a while, but I think it gets the job done.
No, it does, and it's not everywhere. All parishes are different. That depends on where you're at, but this seems to be such a, I guess, the role model of parishes, I would call it.
Yeah, and that kind of stuff, of course, it can make me nervous to think about that. But I will say, well, I can't generalize, but what I can tell you, Beth, is that this, when asked, people respond, and people want to be asked, and people want a little bit of leadership, and people are good, and they want to help other people, both in the matters of this world and in the matters of the next world, right? In the matters of this realm of the spirit, and the corporal works of mercy and spiritual works of mercy.
Yes. So before we wrap up, because you've given us a lot of things to ponder.
You have a lot to edit. I'm sorry. You probably got
No, not at all. I don't have any to edit.
Cutting room floor.
It's all going in.
Okay.
So I'm a Catholic. You're a Catholic, obviously. I've been a Catholic all my life. If there are listeners out there who weren't Catholic, maybe not even Christian, would you have another message aside from the messages you've already given, which were pretty profound?
Yeah. You know what the deal is that I call him the Son of God, and I don't call anybody else that. I call him the way, the truth, and the life. I call him my Savior, the one who opened up and made it possible to go to heaven. I call him Rabbi. But I also call him, the second person of the Trinity. Now, if someone wants to call him just a great philosopher or a great teacher, we have a lot to talk about. That's a big lot to talk about. You know what I mean? And although as Christians, we want to do things for the sake of Christ, right? There are a lot of people who do things not for the sake of Christ, but in accord with Christ. They do things, good people of all different faiths, do all sorts of things that Jesus really wants done. And that might sound patronizing, but it's not about patronizing. It's about overlap and common purpose. I call him God and do it for his sake. If someone else calls him teacher and does it not for his sake, but what they do aligns with what he hopes, that person's my friend, right?
Yes.
That person is, and I want to be considered their friend. I want to be considered their colleague, right? We can do it for different reasons, but there's so much overlap. And of course, yeah, do I wish that I could get everybody in the whole wide world to call them, the way, the truth, and the life? You better believe it. But better minds than mine I haven't been able to do that. And, coming from a part of that, Beth, is I'm coming from a family, so many Catholic families, they come from, and all their grandparents are Catholic, or all their great grandparents are Catholic, right?
Mm-hmm.
I have, just like everybody else, I have 8 great grandparents, and exactly 2 of them were Catholic. Mm. Okay? Jewish, Methodist, Anglican, you name it. Ecumenism starts in kindergarten, right? Right?
Yes.
Right. Like, Mom, how come those cousins don't go to church? Well, we're going to go to their church, and you'll see what goes on at their church. Okay, it's a lot like our church, right? How come those cousins are Jewish? Because that's the way God made them, and that's just the way it is, right? And so, yes, we have to learn about their holidays too, because they're going to come here for our holidays. We're going to go there for their holidays. Okay. Mm-hmm. It's a big, beautiful world, right? Right.
It is.
So, yeah, he chose to become one of us so that we could become like him. And his message is peace for all people of goodwill, right? Isn't that what the angel said?
Yes.
I believe that.
I believe that.
It's a great day for all people of goodwill. Mm-hmm. And guess what? They have jumbles too.
Yes.
And we can be in the jumbles together. We'll work it out.
Yeah.
And miles to go before we sleep, right? Mm-hmm.
Well, I have to say, I'm so happy you came into my life, whether it was by listening to you through the church or my sister and my sister-in-law telling me about you. You're one of those people that have touched a lot of lives. And I know you be humble about it and you won't believe me or won't accept that as my praise to you, but it's an honor to know you.
Well, thank you for that.
I am honored to have had you as a guest today, and I cannot thank you enough.
Sure. Do me a favor. My phone keeps ringing here. There's a dear friend of mine from high school. There's talk about ecumenism. Jewish, lesbian, gay friend. And it looked like tonight's going to be her last night on Earth. Oh. And she's still conscious a little bit. And we always used to joke about burning the English muffins. So I have a big bag of English muffins. Oh. And I hope I get down there before she dies. Her name is Cindy. Would you say a prayer for Cindy that she has a peaceful transition?
I will definitely say a prayer for Cindy.
And her wife, Cheryl, just lost her mother a month ago. And now she's losing her wife tonight or tomorrow.
Oh, wow.
So say a prayer for Cheryl, would you?
I will say a prayer. For sure. And I don't want to hold you up so you can get down and get those English muffins burnt.
Yeah, I should. I'm going to tell her to, I'm going to tell her to take it with them to the next life, but take them to a place where they're not going to get burnt. Okay?
Well, thank you again, Father Hank. I really appreciate this day.
It's been great being with you. It really has been. Thanks. I'm sure I talked too much about myself, but I hope that was answering the question just as a point of comparison for other people.
It's what I wanted. You're the extraordinary person. Thank you again.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining me on Extraordinary People in an Ordinary World. I hope you enjoyed today's show. Please share with a friend. If you know an extraordinary person, I would love to hear from you so that I can feature them on the show. Please email me at bethextraordinarypeople@gmail.com. Or you can message me on Instagram at extraordinary_people_podcast. I look forward to hearing from you. And in the words of Saint Mother Teresa, not all of us can do great things, but we can all do small things with great love. I look forward to our next extraordinary person, the first Friday of next month. See you then.